This was a great question from Tim, because this is something that I really thought about in the offseason. We, as Giants fans, really want the team to win. And you went out there and you really spent money in a way that you had not spent before. And you could argue, well, that's because we wanted to be a really good team. Sure. But I looked at it and I went, especially when they got Snell. I'm like, you've already got Soler, you got Jung-Hoo Lee, you got Matt Chapman, and then, you went out and got Blake Snell. And I was a big fan of it, but I thought to myself, are you building a roster or are you trying to fill the stands? You could argue that they have overlap and they're one and the same, but what is really your motivation here? Because I know the attendance figures were not where they wanted them to be last year. So that question was asked. How much of the moves in the offseason were done with attendance in mind?
It is important, attendance, and I think that's part of the reasons why, we went out and made some aggressive moves in the offseason to bring in the kind of people that draw fans. And I think it's very unfortunate for somebody like Jung-Hoo Lee, who I think the fans were just starting to really appreciate. He's an exciting player. He's got a personality. He's just the kind of person that fans can get behind. And unfortunately, we lost him early. But, at the end of the day, the ballpark and the fan support is the major part of our revenue. So we've got to make sure that we keep fans engaged and have a competitive and interesting baseball team. And, I think we put that together this year, and that was part of our thinking in the offseason.
Kind of appreciate the answer, because
competitive and interesting.
Let me do his 40-second answer in less than 40 seconds.
Okay.
How much of the offseason moves had to do with attendance? A lot. Yeah, no doubt. Almost all of it.
Well, you want to be competitive and interesting. And if you go back to the first year of Farhan Zaidi, which was 2019, which was Bruce Bochy's last year, for the first time in, going back to 2009, you didn't get 3 million fans. You weren't competitive, and you weren't really that interesting. You had kind of the last drips of Buster's career before he took a year off for COVID and all the rest of it. You take 2020 and 2021 attendance-wise, and you throw them out. Sure. Because 2021, they won 107 games, but it was limited attendance. And the one game I went to was 14,000 fans, and you had to be 6 seats from the people next to you, and there's no one behind you. And it was kind of nice to be spaced out, but it was super weird.
It was so weird.
Super weird.
It was so weird. Did you ever do grab a media credential to go to the games that no one was allowed to go to?
That was even more weird.
Weirder.
Yeah. Super
eerie. That ballpark and there's no one in it, but there's a game happening.
And cardboard cutouts.
I mean.
Remember cardboard cutouts?
I do.
That's just.
I do. I have one.
Yeah. Of you?
Yeah.
Oh, that's so funny. Do you still have it?
No, I don't know where it ended up.
That's so funny.
I don't know where I'm still mad about that, actually. I don't know where it ended up.
Even post-COVID, though, and you take the 2021 year where they were competitive and they were very interesting. Fans couldn't really bask in it because the attendance was limited. But after that, you drew 2.4 and 2.5. You haven't even been anywhere near the pre-COVID levels of attendance. Correct. And so absolutely this offseason, it was about being competitive and interesting. Okay, and also style of play. I do think that's, whether this is fair or not, this was something that fans were not loving, right? Gabe Kapler, Farhan Zaidi, and every position being a platoon. A platoon. Yeah. And Farhan had said, he's like, we want everyday players. We, just haven't been able to get any of them to agree. Well, you do have more this year. Jung-Hoo Lee was one. Matt Chapman was another. Tyro Estrada over at second base. Patrick Bailey. To a degree, you're starting to find it in the outfield, even though there's a lot of wiggle room going on there, but part of it is due to injury, but right now Matos is an everyday player. Ramos has become an everyday player. So what about the concerted effort to move away from that and sort of align with the way Bob Melvin likes to run a lineup?
It was a discussion we all had. And again, I do think the team we had to put out there and how we approached it over the last few years was just a result of the kind of mix of players we had and, having platoon pitchers, having to bring people up and down and switching people around. We know that's not great for fan engagement. And I think part of it, having Bob Melvin in there, who has a little bit, putting pitchers in a little bit longer, putting position players in, and then going out and getting position players that, that can be the ones playing regardless if it's a righty or lefty and be out there more. It's just better for the fans. And, we listened to the fans, and we heard the criticism, and we saw the drop in attendance. We dropped down to 17th last year. We're up to 7th this year. So, I think it's working, and the fans seem excited, and we're just thrilled to have people back in the park, and all of that helps the decisions in the offseason.
I wonder if everybody hears something through all of these comments made by Greg Johnson. I wonder if you hear what I hear. And that is, and a lot of you are not going to like this. That man that we've been playing all afternoon long is super happy with the way things are going.
Definitely. I'm okay with that.
Well, hold on now. Understand what that means. Like, he is super happy with the way things are going. ... Super happy with Farhan Zaidi.
Of course.
Super content. Because,
and I was surprised that you asked TK a question about what kind of seat is Farhan on.
Yeah.
Because I'm not saying it was a bad question, but I agree with what you're saying about Greg Johnson. The seat that Farhan is on is cushioned. There's no temperature at all above room temperature. It's cozy, comfy.
Would that question have landed differently to you if it had been asked 2 weeks ago?
Definitely.
19 and 25.
Absolutely.
Well, see, that's interesting, because now what we're basically saying is we're admitting that we're just week to week with our opinion. Like, 888,
somewhat, but okay.
No,
give a number.
888-957-9570. Are you now, and again, I don't want to say that any of you are anything. Some of you might not like Farhan Zaidi. Some of you might think that Farhan Zaidi is underrated or has actually done an okay job. But wherever you sit, are you now suddenly very comfortable with the conceptual direction of the San Francisco Giants, and how much of that has to do with simply the way they've played the last 2 weeks?
A lot, and it's not only how they've played, but it's the fact that the young guys have come up and contributed. And I know he didn't draft Matos or Ramos or Luciano. He didn't draft any of them. But the idea of them now coming up and contributing to a little bit of a changing of the guard, and I know it's not permanent, but that has helped Farhan Zaidi in the same way that Kyle Shanahan benefited from the Trey Lance debacle, the fact that Brock Purdy, Mr. Irrelevant, came in and saved the day. If that never had happened, well, Kyle Shanahan, he may not even have his job at this point after blowing that, trading first-round capital to take Trey Lance and having him not work out, but nobody seems to really mind because Brock Purdy came in and was spectacular.
Let me throw something else at you, though, because you mentioned in there, Farhan didn't draft Ramos, he didn't draft Luciano, he didn't draft Matos. I do think that we need to, and this is not just about Farhan or the Giants, in general, we need to stop only giving credit. When a player's good, we only give credit to the person who drafted him. That's it. You picked him, you're amazing. If you didn't pick him, you get no hand in the credit for that player at all. Is that fair?
No.
Because I'd argue that development has absolutely, at minimum, as much to do with a player's success as the sort of like the predictive nature of picking that player in the first place. We've watched a lot of players who were drafted low. They develop. Draft high. They don't. Who oversees that development? I'm not trying to give credit to any one person because this isn't a one-person job.
Right.
Drafting the player and developing the player is the whole system. But again, the president of baseball operations is just that. He's the president of baseball operations. So in the areas where operations go well, then he's got to get the attaboy, right?
Yep.
Okay, here's Greg Johnson on just that. The farm system during the Farhan Zaidi era.
Looking at the minor league depth we have and how some players are moving up and looking at the depth of pitching we have, I think we're among the best right now in baseball. So I think a lot of that should be attributed to Farhan. And the fact that we stayed competitive with a team that didn't have that lift from the farm system, I think is a testament to Farhan as well. So I think, it was a difficult position to be in where you had to, move players in and out. You had to platoon pitchers. It's easy to criticize that, but we did stay competitive. competitive in a pretty difficult place as far as having players moving up.
Well, that one's pretty tough for me. There's two pieces to that conversation right there. One, he's crediting Farhan. Okay, put that aside for a second. But the comment about he kept us competitive when we didn't have one, it sort of feels like you're saying he kept us competitive through a rebuild that we did a lot of work to tell you wasn't a rebuild.
Yeah. And it didn't have to be a rebuild. I mean, it was only a rebuild because you were unable to bring in free agents and your farm wasn't ready. And so that's why it felt like a rebuild. And the rebuild was done by Farhan in a series of moves. And you can credit the Tyro Estrada move and the other 87 moves that he made with rough in and rough out and all of the other micro moves. And you had a couple of rent and ace. You had Gosman and Rodon, who you basically paid for a year, and then they went elsewhere. And so your rebuild was kind of done on the fly, and it was done half-heartedly because ideally you were going to have these Matoses and the Ramoses come up a year ago or maybe even sooner than that and really produce. Not Luciano, because he's only 22 now, but other guys in the farm. And Joey Bart is a guy who I know they didn't draft, but you were right to say it's draft and develop, and they didn't really develop Joey Bart, and now he's out there in Pittsburgh doing a little bit more than he did here.
You know what's really interesting about the whole young guys thing, though?
Yeah.
I've noticed this, and I get it. We're excited about it for two reasons. There's three guys that came up together. It sort of feels that way. They came up at about the same time. They're names that we've been hearing for a long time. FP talks about how they have provided the Latin flavor. They're exciting. They're offensive players. They've got speed, young, vibe, got it. Matos, Ramos, Luciano. Do you know what gets left out of this conversation? Harrison and Bailey. They've already been here. And Bailey's
and Doval, too.
Yeah, and Bailey's playing like an all-star.
Yeah.
Now, these are not just developed players under this era. They were actually drafted by Farhan Zaidi. So we're focused all on three young guys who just got here, and we're rolling right by some young guys who've already been here. So that, to me, is very, very much a huge part of this conversation. Because what is really the overarching theme is not, hey, three players showed up and they've got talent and vibe. Right. The bigger issue is, we have been saying this for years, you have to have homegrown players producing on your roster. And for the first time in a while, I sort of feel like we are watching, finally, the manifestation of a homegrown core. And look, I know Logan's been around now for a while, but yes, you get to add him in to this whole thing. Like it can't just be one guy. It has to be like seven people. And the Giants right now sort of look like they have the makings of that.
Yeah.
That changes everything.
And that's why I think that, your question to Tim Kawakami about what Greg Johnson thinks of Farhan is a good one, because 3 weeks ago, before Matos and Ramos and even Luciano, as much as he's done with the bat, before these guys came up, the big question with a flatlining team 6 games below 500 was, what the hell, Farhan? Your free agent signings aren't doing squat, and these young guys, play the kids. Our program director, Matt Nahigian, on Twitter every day, play the kids. And then now, because you had no choice due to injury, you played the kids, and the kids are playing great, and the team is winning. So yes, Farhan gets credit for that because it's draft and develop, and he didn't draft him, but it's his system, president of baseball operations. He oversees it. They got better. Wow. They're playing better. So that's why I think that Farhan's seat, like it or hate it, Giants fans, because this is all happening, he does get credit.
I don't mind this, but I want to admit and acknowledge that we, the Giants fans right now, are being prisoners of the moment.
Of course.
So when I say that I notice in this whole conversation that Greg Johnson is just filled with contentment, he's just super content. It's like, yeah, y'all feel okay about that right now because the Giants are in second place. They've got a winning record. They're in a playoff spot. They just took 2 or 3 from the Phillies. They've won 10 of 13. Hunky-dory, fine. You still feel that way Monday if they get swept?
Yeah.
Do
Yeah,
you?
you do.
Okay, you do.
Well, I do.
What? Okay.
And he does.
And then what if next week is 2-4? Like what? Like, you know what I mean? Like
if you wind up 79-83 again,
then we got a problem.
Then we've got a problem.
We got
Absolutely.
a real problem. So
although if you're 79-83 and these three youngsters show that they belong,
I'm kind of out
it changes it a little bit.
No, not really. Not to me. Like the San Francisco Giants should not be doing that. We are not hey, things are looking like they're headed in the right direction.
I agree, but
squad.
if you have young guys play well, though, that does change it a little bit. If you end up with a losing record at the end of the year and it's not because these young guys aren't ready, maybe it's Snell who never figures it out. Maybe you have other pitching injuries. Whatever happens, if Luciano and Matos and Ramos appear to be real major leaguers, that makes you feel better about this year's losing record as opposed to last year where it was, I can't believe they're giving Farhan an extension.
Right. No, I understand that. Yeah. I look at it right now and I think to myself, I wonder if Giants fans as a whole are comfortable with the idea that the organization is now looking at everything that's taken place and they're going to put out to the public, boy, we are super happy with the way everything's going. I'm like, like, yes, the last 2 weeks have been really cool. But understand, they're like the first cool 2 weeks of the last year and a half. So do you get to go on the parade of like, we're really stoked, everyone's showing up to the building, we've got young players, and look at us sort of kind of in the neighborhood of the Dodgers. Like we're a little early.
I get it.
We're a little early for the yay, we're doing great party.
Yeah, I don't know if he's quite going that far.
No, I'm hearing, he didn't say that.
Right.
I'm hearing that he's happy with how everything's going. And I guess my thought is, I'm fine with that if this is how it's going to be always.
I get that.
Going forward.
And I know where he's coming from. And you look at the attendance, and they are 2,300 fans a game up. Yep. And he mentioned that in his answer to Tim about how that's kind of the lifeblood of making money is having people show up to your games. And so they're averaging 33,000 or more fans a game. And this weekend is going to be even more than that. You're probably looking at 3 sellouts with the Yankees.
I would think, sure.
In town.
Sure.
You're spending more. Your team's more exciting. You're competitive and interesting, and people are showing up. I don't begrudge him for being a little giddy at how things are going.